The Circular Learning Objectives list represents our vision for a future circular education, but also a systematic approach for circularity to become effectively embedded in curricula. The CLO list follows the classical taxonomy of knowledge, skills and competencies as a means for establishing a relatedness with the system of objectives already employed by the faculty. Furthermore, its modular structure also allows us to effectively incorporate what we have learned so far from our research on circularity, as expressed in the Scales and Aspects model. The CLO list can be used to drive curricular changes at large scale, but also smaller changes to individual courses. The CLO list opens with two basic blocks: context and basic knowledge. The first block, just like its name implies, focuses on contextualizing circularity within the broader architectural discourse. These objectives revolve around the relation of circularity to systems theory and complexity theory. What does the systemic change circularity calls for really mean? The relation of circularity to sustainability is also included here, as well as its relation to the water, energy and food nexus. Finally, the social relevance of circularity, as well as its potential in contributing to the establishment of new design ethics, is also accounted for. How can circularity inform design decisions? What are the values it relates to? Basic knowledge block, on the other hand, features a series of terms that have a proven value in representing circularity in either a verbal or a designerly way. The main role of this block lies in facilitating communication, whereas different approaches can be distinguished and therefore facilitate, in turn, decision-making processes. These two blocks from the CLO list also form the basis of the content included in the present course. All content units have been structured along these lines. One part follows a discussion on contextualization, another provides with basic definitions. One discusses materials, and finally another examines design. All of these parts are accompanied by pedagogical material as well. How can we teach the components of these two basic blocks? The list further distinguishes between three learning approaches. Level 1 represents the disciplinary approach and focuses on circularity as it currently manifests within the design discipline. This level of learning examines circularity as an organizing principle for design and refers mostly to the model's inner configuration of the scales interdependency. Knowledge and skills of that level are related to getting learners acquainted with the most prevalent design approaches and engage them in circularity in a designerly way. We call this knowledge applied. Learners should be able to distinguish between the scales and identify their interdependencies, acknowledge the existence of aspects, the outer ring, as what conditions the scale's interdependency, and recognize how circularity specifically affects design decisions. The Circular Design Atlas, another action originating from Circular Impulse Initiative, represents such an attempt. The Atlas will feature state-of-the-art examples of application of circular principles applied across the 6 scales identified by the Scales to Aspects diagram. Level 2 represents the interdisciplinary approach. It looks more closely into the synergies that circularity stirs between the design discipline and other affiliated disciplines, mostly what the model describes as aspects, such as economy, management, social studies, as these have been already identified. We call this knowledge critical. As such, it pertains to an attitude that engages in recognizing the intricate relations between disciplines and their limitations, as well as producing ways and tools of making informed decisions. Level 3 represents learning that is transdisciplinary. Transdisciplinarity is intended here as the ability to work in the space in between the well-defined disciplines to explore new ways of thinking that have not yet been discovered. This approach alludes to producing novel ways of increasing the impact of circularity, as well as recognizing opportunities for circularity to benefit from different contexts. We call this knowledge new. There is no way a strict divide between the 3 levels included in the CLO list, nor does this listing necessarily represent a temporal sequence. It simply represents different approaches in understanding and managing how circularity challenges design thinking. New knowledge can always be created within any of the three approaches. Furthermore, what comprises knowledge and skills is not finite, and it is itself subject to change should new understandings or perceptions emerge.